For the most part, I'm pretty positive on the channel, but I do get comments like, Michael, why aren't you talking about this band or that band? And for the most part, if I don't really have anything positive to say, then I'm just not gonna say anything. There's already so much negativity in the world, we really don't need any more. Except for this video. I looked all over online and put together a list of what most people think are the worst emo albums of all time. I listened to all of these albums recently in preparation for this video, and I also threw in some of my personal opinions. So, this one's for you. Most importantly, this is all for fun, so relax. First up, My Chemical Romance's Danger Days. Now, this is mostly a rock album in my opinion, but as far as mainstream pop culture goes, My Chemical Romance is so synonymous with emo, so that's why it's on the list. Besides a few technical issues I have with the album, I actually think this is a pretty good rock album. The album is too long, and a lot of the songs are too long, and I really don't care about the concept of this album at all. I understand it was always going to be hard for MCR to follow up such a massively popular and influential album like The Black Parade, but this album is all about futuristic punks battling a evil corporation during or after the apocalypse. It does nothing for me. But if you get past that, I like this album. I would have shortened it down maybe like 10 songs, definitely shortened down the length of the songs, and I would have even went more into the rock and roll kind of sound on this album, even more than My Chemical Romance already did. It's funny, every time I listen to this album and I watch like the music videos and I think of all the theatrics and everything that goes into this album, I always think of I Believe in a Thing Called Love by The Darkness. Not saying that My Chemical Romance should have been like a parody band or made a parody album, but I feel like they should have just had fun with this album. Black Parade was so dark and intense and so serious. The band themselves have said that they wanted to kind of get away from that, so they should have embraced the fun, embraced the theatrics, not go like full parody like The Darkness did on I Believe in a Thing Called Love, but you know, turn it up to 11, have some fun. It's rock and roll. We also need the song Destroya in an upcoming Godzilla movie where he's fighting Destroya. I mean, come on. Rae Jepsen's Emotion. Now I know what you're thinking, but I remember when this album came out, and I don't really know why it got kind of adopted by the emo scene, but you don't have to take my word for it. You can go look at r/emo and you're going to see a bunch of posts and comments about this album. I literally think it might be because emo was short for emotion, but then even on the album art, like emo isn't spelled because it's E, then the space for the M-O. So I'm not entirely sure, but this album's great. Seriously, all jokes aside, if you still think that Rae Jepsen is just a call me maybe person, then you're missing out on some of the best pop music in the last 10 years. And this album has plenty of emo on it. Love songs, breakup songs, songs about boy problems. What else could you want? And not to mention, When I Needed You is a great album closer. Panic at the Disco's pretty odd. This is one I both understand and disagree with. When You Had a Fever You Can't Sweat Out, it was so fun, so dancey, it was so different than anything else that was happening in the scene at the time. So I understand when people listen to Pretty Odd for the first time and it's this folk, indie type of an album, and everyone is listening to the songs going, why is this dude talking about the sun and the moon falling in love with each other? What's going on? But this album has a lot of good songs. 9 in the Afternoon, A Green Gentleman, Northern Downpour. It's just, again, another album with way too many songs, but we all agree that this is not the worst Panic at the Disco album, right? Taking Back Sunday 152. This album is just too produced, it's too clean, it's too nice. And I'm not someone who just wants Tell All Your Friends Part 2. I actually really liked Tidal Wave, but this album, it's just not there. There are good moments on this album, like on Keep Going, but they don't last. I really hope Taking Back Sunday release demos that are more raw, more gritty versions of the songs that we got on 152, because then I think we could actually have a good Taking Back Sunday album with substance. I really don't know what the band was thinking going into this album, but again, I think Tidal Wave was a good mix of old Taking Back Sunday and kind of a more kind of classic, kind of rock and roll kind of a sound. But I do like So Old on 152. Remo Drive, pretty much everything after Greatest Hits. First off, let me say something positive. I think naming your debut album Greatest Hits is hilarious. I love everything about it. I can't believe it took until 2017 for an emo band to do something like that, especially in the scene with, you know, emo, pop, punk, and punk rock, long, funny song titles, all of that stuff. So I love everything about that decision. And it's not like I'm going to say something shocking or have a hot take about greatest hits. I like it. I remember when this album came out, and it's rare when the scene can agree on anything, but pretty much everybody agreed, yeah, this is a great album. But then everything after that is basically indie rock, which is fine, but they made that big sound, that big sonic change on album 2. You just had one album. You got all these new fans who like that. They'd like to hear something at least similar to that on your next album, but yeah, that didn't happen. I can understand changing your sound and experimenting maybe with 1 or 2 songs on an album, or on album, you know, 4 or 5, or even album 3, but you just got popular, you just got all these fans, and you completely change your sound on them with album 2. I think that's kind of a wild move. Look, we have 3 albums post Greatest Hits, and it's clear that Remo Drive has no interest in being an emo band. They want to be an indie rock band, which is fine. They just had an album come out this year. Granted, it was at the beginning of this year, but it came out this year, and I haven't heard anybody talking about it. Again, you want to be an indie rock band, that's fine, but I was also interested because I remember when the big kind of shift in sound happened for Remo Drive. I remember seeing comments that Remo Drive even stopped playing stuff off of Greatest Hits. So I looked at their recent set lists, and it looks like they are incorporating a few songs here and there, and I think they have to, because look at their top songs on Spotify. I'm very happy that Blue Ribbon is on this list, because I actually really like the pop music EP. I personally think it's the last good release that Remo Drive ever put out, and it was an experimentation, right? That's what, in my opinion, an EP is for. It was only 3 songs. I remember when that EP came out, nobody was like, oh, nobody was worried that Remo Drive was gonna be like a pop band and not do anything like emo or pop punk or go indie rock. Nobody thought that. It was 3 songs, it was an EP. Nobody really paid much attention to it. You either liked it or you just disregarded it because, again, it was a 3-song EP. But if you dismissed this at the time and you never listened to it, I think you should go back and listen to it. If Remo Drive had kept the sound on the pop music EP, I think people would still be talking about them today. And we have to talk about the album title, Pop Music, on a 3-song EP where all the songs are more poppy than your previous stuff, and the album cover is a can of soda pop. Again, credit where credit is due. Bravo! Because I see them all over my TikTok feed, let's talk about TX2. Now, TX2 hasn't released an album since 2019, so I just kind of listened to all of the top songs on Spotify, and again, I am on email of TikTok, so I can see what's happening. I'm not going to sit here, or I guess stand here in this case, and just bash TX2. I've seen a lot of the discourse happening around him, basically calling him a poser, and I personally think it's hilarious we're talking about posers in 2024. Did we learn nothing from SLC Punk? We're all posers. Even more so than the music, I think the emo scene is, and has always been, protective and really guarded in the emo scene, the music, the aesthetic. So I think mostly because this music has, you know, helped a lot of us, or this music has been our favorite music since our youth. So I can understand being so protective and guarded from anybody who is kind of perceived as, you know, being an outsider and kind of maybe not giving back to the scene. Now, I don't know about you, but I would guess if you're watching this video, you weren't the popular kid in high school. You weren't the star quarterback on the football team. You weren't the prom queen. You were probably the loner listening to, you know, music in your headphones that was moody, loud, angry, and intense. So I always equated the protectiveness of emo fans of emo to kind of like Marvel. Now, hear me out. Obviously, if you were in, you know, high school now and there was no uniform, right? But if you showed up in a Marvel shirt, no one would even think twice about it, right? Everybody likes Marvel. But I always like to think of the poor kids who I guess would have been called nerds in like the 70s or 80s who loved Marvel, who loved, you know, DC and comics and all that stuff. And you know that they got bullied for liking it because this was so long ago. And now they're probably, you know, following their high school bully on Instagram, and he's posting about the next phase of what the MCU is going to be. So that's kind of how I would describe the emo fans being so protective of, you know, emo, or even, you know, the punk fans, hardcore fans, metal. You can see it in any kind of alternative music genre. And I'm bringing it back to TX2. I know he's done a bunch of videos, you know, saying that, you know, he grew up an emo fan and all that stuff. And I'm not here to, you know, make any judgment on him, positive or negative. I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on why I think the scene is reacting the way that it is. I also don't know what these emo TikTokers can do to ingratiate themselves in the scene. Do you want them to talk about Cap'n Jazz and Sunny Day Real Estate? Because I'd hate to break it to you, but when people think of emo, they don't think of those two bands. They think of My Chemical Romance, or Taking Back Sunday, or maybe even Jimmy Eat World. This might just be my opinion, but I also think the scene is kind of still trying to understand and wrap its head around just TikTok and promoting your music on TikTok. Like, the best example I can think of is, like, you know, is it punk rock to, you know, film yourself promoting your upcoming song or album, or, you know, could you envision, you know, Black Flag or Minor Threat doing that if they were around? Or even, you know, a big band like My Chemical Romance, you know, doing some kind of trendy TikTok dance. But I've said it a million times on the channel, for every subgenre of alternative music, punk, emo, hardcore, metal, anything in kind of our sphere, there is almost no mainstream outlet for any of this music that we all like. So, in my opinion, yes, if Minor Threat was around in 2024, yeah, they better be on TikTok. On my last video where I talked about emo and TikTok, there were a lot of comments letting me know that I, in fact, am a poser because I really wasn't aware of Johnnie Guilbert, who was nice enough to leave a comment on the video, so thanks, Johnny, for that. But I vaguely have memories of the, you know, influencers on Warped Tour in the 2010s, but I'm a little bit older, so none of that was geared towards me. That was nowhere on my radar, went completely over my head, so it's not like I was pretending in any of my reactions in that music video. I had no idea that I was the same person that was on, like, the Warped Tour for the influencers and stuff in the 2010s. That was nowhere in my sphere. None of my friends were talking about it. It just wasn't a thing that was in my life. So all of my, you know, reactions in that video were genuine. But I have since caught up on all the Johnnie Guilbert and Jake Weber lore. And as I was doing research for this video, I saw that Jake just released a new music video for his song Mess, so let's talk about it. First, kids, don't smoke. I understand it looks very cool in movies and music videos and TV and stuff like that. Objectively, yeah, it does look cool, but don't smoke. I kind of feel that was almost like a Dare PSA. I think I still have my Dare shirt somewhere around here. I think most people want me to stand here and just bash all of this TikTok music, but you gotta understand, if you're a new viewer to the channel, I love all of this music. I want emo, pop punk, punk rock, ska, metal, hardcore, shoegaze. I want all of this music to be even more popular than it was in the early 2000s. So if your introduction into emo is one of these TikTokers, and then you go down into the comments, and then you go down the emo rabbit hole, and you eventually start listening to and discovering, you know, American football, Penfold, and Oso Oso, then good. I think that's a good thing. As far as the song Mess, I think my only, not like issue or anything, I think the vocals maybe are just a little bit too, I don't know if monotone is the right word, but like if you looked at the, you know, vocal track, it kind of just seems like it's going like this the whole time, not, you know, kind of, you know, in and out, loud, soft, which is, you know, the thing that is synonymous with emo vocals. But as I was listening to a bunch of, you know, different songs and with TikTok and all that stuff, and then, you know, it popped up on my, you know, recommended on YouTube and stuff, I actually think the song Ecstasy with both, ironically enough, Jake and Johnny, is probably the song that I like the most, and it actually got stuck in my head. Alright, posers, that's it for the video. Please like the video, it really helps me out. Please subscribe if you haven't, share the video, and thanks for watching.